So this is the Optoma Cinemax D2. As you can see, that was a very bright room. It's a very bright image. Compared to the P2, my family feels that it has better color and image quality. I'll get a little closer here so you can see. I have it on simulated HD currently, and so it does a great job of looking like HD if it's not HD, and the color accuracy is pretty good for right out of the box that I've noticed. Resolution, I think it does look a little better than the P2, especially whenever you're watching 4K movies, or even off of YouTube. The downside is it doesn't have image smoothing, so if you're watching something that's 24 frames a second and it's pretty action-packed and it's moving around quite a bit, it's going to be pretty jumpy. If you have internet stuttering and the image is stuttering with the frame smoothing, it helps out a little bit. Here it won't do that. So that's a downside. The other downside is that the menu is a little more abbreviated, and a lot of things are turned off and you can't even turn them on, like 3D. Hooked up my computer to do 3D, and it wouldn't let me turn it on unless I had 120 frames a second at 1920 by 1080. Whereas 1080p, 60 frames a second, it wouldn't let you turn it on. And then it has to detect it, it won't let you select it, because I wanted to do over under, and it wouldn't let me do that, whereas the other projector allowed me to do that. So that's also a negative. And so I have all of this just at the standard stock. Brightness mode is eco, and then there's dynamic black. I didn't like that. It seemed like the colors were a little off with that, so I leave that off. And I do have geometric correction on it. So if you look, you can see a little bit of light that escapes off to the side. That was the only way that I could get it to fill the top and the bottom, is to have it a little bit bigger on the sides. And so this is actually the sound of the speakers. Now the speakers, there's less robust speakers in this. They don't have as much power. They're not as good a quality. But I use a soundbar anyhow, so they do definitely sound cheaper than the original. But again, I use a soundbar. The other thing is it also doesn't have any smart TV capabilities pre-baked into it. That they do have a smart option, but that just comes with a adapter that you plug in. So again, menu is a little less functional. Power settings, with my computer, it didn't detect that my computer was hooked up, so whenever I had the auto power off, it would power off after the 20 minutes or whatever you had it set for, even though the computer was running. It seems to work okay with my NVIDIA Shield. Eye projector sensor, that definitely works pretty well. I've used it a few times on accident. And auto input source, I had difficulty getting it started to pick up stuff, but once it did, then it seemed like it picked it up every time, so I'm not sure why it was having trouble initially. And then also, whenever I'm watching a 4K image on here, it looks about as good as the 1080p image whenever you're watching it at 4K bandwidth. So I ended up just going back to the 1080p. Now when we're watching Batman on a 4K disc through the drive with HDR, it definitely looks better at 4K, but it's still pretty impressive. This is the P2. Again, same thing, very bright room. See the detail of it. They both look fantastic as far as the image quality goes, especially on an ALR screen. Just like before, I'll show you that it again has the brightness to sort of negate light, especially with an ALR screen. That still looks good. I know I'm just using my phone camera, so it probably doesn't have too much quality, so you might have a hard time realizing how nice the image is with the lights on overhead. And so very, very bright. And so some of this is just the camera not being very good to show the image quality. But I was very happy with the P2, other than the gaming lag. It's pretty much non-usable when it comes to gaming, but everything else was very, very nice. I do miss the smoothing, and I miss the 3D. Those are the two things I miss. As far as the sound goes, it definitely sounds much better than the D2, but I use my soundbar, so that doesn't matter. As far as the smart stuff goes, that doesn't bother me none either, because I use the NVIDIA Shield. There's usually much better smart devices than what that comes with. The HDMI inputs are all 2.0 on the D2, and there's only one here that will do 4K, which is the first HDMI. So I have my Blu-ray, ultra high definition Blu-ray, attached to that one for the HDR 4K, like Batman movies and things like that. But I can't even use my computer to play games on it, so I don't really use that for anything else. This ended up having, after a while, a dead pixel, which on projectors are white. You can kind of see it. Right there in the middle. So I'm going to send it back in with warranty and then fix that. But because of parts and labor, they don't know when they're going to be able to get it back to me. So then that's whenever I decided to try the D2. And although I'm going to miss the frame smoothing and or motion smoothing and the 3D, I'm going to use it more for gaming than either one of those. So I think I'll probably keep the D2 and then sell the P2. Both projectors are about the same size. They both have kind of the same look to them. Although, like I said, I think they're a little ashamed of their speakers on the second one, so the P2 shows the speakers through the screen. The D2 does not. I actually like it not showing through there. It kind of looks like it's worn out. But as I was saying, they both need to be a certain distance away from the wall, which is obviously ultra short throw compared to most projectors, but it's still a decent ways away, especially with the front things. So we ended up buying a very cheap, I want to say I got it at Target for like 35 bucks or something, for the entertainment system, and then our center, and so it actually ends right here, but it would leave a huge hole behind it. So what we ended up doing is we took some, it was actually my wife's idea, cardboard, and we made a shelf on the back side. We put some contact paper that is black on the sides, and then we had some marbling contact paper on the top. Cut a little hole for the wires that come through, and then we put books and things that are very, very light. These are actually fake books that are hollow on the inside, so that we have those on the back side on the cardboard and they don't really dent it in too much. Got a ALR screen, which is pretty nice, the Vivid Storm, 120 inch, as well as a soundbar system that has the surround sound to it. Now, if you can find something that is a little lower to the ground, that's probably a little better, because the screen is probably, or I should say the image on the screen is probably about 2.5 feet taller than I think it should be, where the center of your vision is the center of the screen. But we didn't want to cut into this, and this was about as low as we could find that would have a couple shelves in it. But if you could find one that's probably another 6 inches shorter than this, that'd be great. But we went to Home Depot and I bought these, which are, I think they're 4x6s. And I measured the top of this, so I just had them cut all of the pieces of board or pieces of wood to the same height, and then I just put the self-rising projector screen on there, and then you can adjust it so that the screen bottom is right where you want it. And so it rises right out of there. This is a rental property, so we didn't want to have a screen on the wall. We didn't want to mount anything, and with ALRs, if they're a little bit warped, it really shows. Matter of fact, we were planning on just putting it on the wall, but it's textured walls, and that looks horrible because the image is being shown vertical, and so then you have lots of shadows of any kind of bumps you have, just like the warps show pretty bad. Now the screen comes with a USB adapter that will trigger the switch when the projector is turned on, and trigger the switch when the projector is turned off, to raise and lower it automatically when you turn it on. The P2 does that when you turn it on, but when you turn it off it doesn't, so then you have to manually lower it. The D2, on the other hand, does raise and lower it with the USB without any issues. Again, I think it's kind of a newer thing, so the D2 has it baked in. These are the inputs. You can see on the top, which is the D2, the newer one, you have the RS-232, which the bottom one doesn't have. You also have 3 HDMIs. The P2 has another HDMI on the side, as well as a USB on the side, whereas there's just a bracket for it, and they don't use that. This is the P2, and this is the D2. Lastly, I just want to show you the remotes. So this is the remote for the P2. It is metallic, probably aluminum. Feels better in the hand. It seems to be able to control it a little bit off center. You don't actually have to point at it as much as the D2 is. The other thing that's nice about this is it's rechargeable. It has a little plug for you to recharge it. The D2 has a plastic remote. Lots of symbols that don't make a whole lot of sense on them, but you finally learn how to do it. This is the volume toggle down at the bottom. Pluses and minuses, very easy to do. Here it is these two buttons, and that's mute. It's in the middle of all these other buttons. It's kind of difficult to get to, but again, use a soundbar. It doesn't really matter a whole lot. And this comes with batteries, AAAs, which I guess you could get rechargeables, and then it's kind of a moot point, but it was nice to have this automatically have a rechargeable plug in it anyhow. So I like this remote better than this remote, but I don't use it that much other than to initially set it up. So again, moot point. UI here has, like I said, the smart TV aspect. So you have your media where you can play stuff yourself from files. You have Optoma Connect and a marketplace where you can get different streaming services with your apps. It'll pop up there. So you have those. You can also mirror your phone, do your input sources. And then you can change the wallpaper, and you can also connect wirelessly with the P2 where you cannot with the P or the D2. With the D2, it's only with USB can you upgrade the firmware, whereas with the P2 you can connect wirelessly, and then it'll let you upgrade the firmware wirelessly, which is nice. And the standby seemed to work with the computer, whereas it didn't with the D2. So there's that. And then the normal menu that you get whenever you're watching YouTube or whatever is a much more robust. So we have this on game. So let's go to HDR, sorry. Then we'll go back to YouTube afterwards. And have different types of HDR. I believe they're both the same in that sense. Geometric correction, you have a whole lot more options for the warp calibration on the P2, as far as how much it moves and how large your warp number is, meaning like you can make it really small on the pattern when you're looking at the grid. Let's see here, let me show you. So the grid that's on there right now, if you increase the warp number, you're going to get more squares, and then you can adjust every one of those little squares if you find that you need to. That being said, I was able to do what I needed to do with the D2 without too much issue. EDID gives you a bunch of options here of the different versions. On the D2, it doesn't give you that at all. Maybe that's one of the reasons why I have problems with the 3D. I'm not sure. It's got an EQ, whereas the D2 I don't believe has. This is a 3D text I was talking about, where it has the different 3D formats here, whereas the other one is either on or off. It also lets you pick the kind of glasses you have, although really only the DLP was the only kind that I could get to work on it anyhow. So I guess it's a moot point. But at least I was able to get the 3D to turn on. Gaming mode, that's the main reason why I got the D2, is that hooking up a computer to the P2, you really can't play any games. Even like turn-based games was just difficult to put your mouse where you need it to go, because you would overshoot or undershoot all the time. Whereas with the D2, it's barely perceptible lag, so it's definitely much better for gaming. I played quite a few games on it, and it felt like a monitor, really. Whereas this, you can't play any games on it. And so that's the main reason why I got the D2, and it definitely works much better. As far as speaker delay, they both have that. Test pattern, all that, eye protection, focus, all that's pretty much the same. Like I said, the 3D was the biggest letdown on the D2. I haven't been able to get that to work, and it doesn't give you very many options for it. It's either on or off. Geometric correction is definitely limited, and a lot of the display mode, dynamic range and brightness mode and things like that. On the other one, it's eco or like an enhanced blacks, dynamic black, that's what it is, which I didn't like. Pure motion, I definitely missed that on some of the movies. The D2 does not have this, and I don't know why they left that out. That's a big bummer. On the P2, as I was mentioning, it's much easier to do 3D stuff. So even though there is no 3D image currently on there, if I wanted to, I could go down and start 3D, and then you can pick the type of format. Whereas with the D2, you have to have, well, the only way I was able to have it even not be grayed out on the menu is to have it at 120 hertz and 1080p, and then it only allowed me to turn it on or off, and then whenever I turned it on, it never detected my 3D signal and wouldn't let me select anything. So yeah, I don't know how much my phone is smoothing out the video, but it is a little more jerky on the right than it is on the left. It's much smoother on the left with the frame smoothing. Overall though, the image much brighter on the D2. Again, 1,000 hours on the left one, which is the P2, but with 20,000 hours before it's supposed to get halfway as bright, it really shouldn't affect it that much. It seems like the dynamic range simulated is a little better on the D2. Frame smoothing, I think this does a pretty good job of it. With Daniel Craig, it'll kind of show him kind of come across the screen a little bit with his body, and you'll see on the left it'll be pretty smooth, and on the right it's going to be a little jerky. Also with the D2, one of the nice things was when I plugged it into the computer, was watching some streaming movies as well as some Blu-ray movies on there. The screen was much more crisp. It had kind of like an over pixelized image on the P2. I don't know if it's just didn't have the frequency right or what, I'm not sure. But no matter what resolution you used and frequency that you used, it seemed to be that it was a little more pixelated on the P2 than on the D2. Okay, in summary, which one of these should you pick? Well, if you're just looking for an ultra short throw projector, don't forget you do have to buy the screen to make it look as good as it can, and that can cost you about as much as the projector. So if you are in a longer room and can use a normal throw projector, you can get the same image quality with a much cheaper setup cost, especially since the screens are cheaper. However, if you're like me and are in a smaller room, or you have a lot of foot traffic in front of the projector beam, then you might want to go with the ultra short throw projector. And if you do, both of these, the Optoma D2 and the Optoma P2, are excellent projectors. Now, the D2 has a few things that the P2 doesn't have. It potentially has a better color gamut and brightness. At least that's how we see it. It could just be the settings. On paper, they're both equivalent. It has much lower input lag to where you can play games, and the P2, you pretty much cannot play games on it. It's just not usable in my opinion. That's the biggest qualification there. It has a better functioning USB trigger so that the screens go up and down automatically. It's got more HDMI 2.0 inputs, 3 versus 2. It's got a RS-232, and it potentially has a better PC image. Could have just been the way I had it set up. The P2, on the other hand, has pure motion, which is that frame smoothing, and I think that's very important. I don't know why they didn't add that to the D2, so that aids you in any 24 frames a second Blu-ray movies that are action-packed. It's got a much easier 3D functionality to it, where you can manually turn it on and pick the kind you want. The D2, it doesn't seem to be working for me. Much better speakers, better menus with more robust settings. It's a smart projector automatically. It's got Wi-Fi. You can get the updates off of Wi-Fi. You can stream, and you can do screen mirroring. So again, if you're going to do gaming, D2. If you're just watching movies, you can probably get a used P2 much cheaper, and even new, the prices will probably be coming down since it's the old model. And I think it's not an upgrade. I think it's more of a lateral move to go to a D2. Thanks for watching.